There we go. Okay. There we go. Sorry. My name's Kim Cameron, and I'm with the League of Women Voters of Cortland County. Thank you all so very, very much for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. This has been a little bit of my brainchild, but it is a combination of all of the leagues within Congressman Mannion's district. So that would be the Cortland League, as well as Syracuse Metro, Utica, and Cazenovia leagues have all come together to ask Congressman Mannion to do a forum with us. And the way this forum is going to be set up is, for starters, it is being recorded, and we will send out a link to the recording later tomorrow or the next day, something of that nature. And this is going to be a webinar, so you will see both Erica Smitka, who is our executive director, as well as Congressman Mannion on the screen. Those two will be talking to each other. We will not have the chat function available, but we will have question and answer available. So please put whatever questions you want into the question and answer, and we will, in the background, try to answer those questions for you. The League is a nonpartisan organization. We educate, advocate, and litigate for democracy, as well as voting and voter empowerment. And so that's what you're going to hear a bit about today. And the questions that we have built for this forum, we developed them from all of the answers that you provided to us when you registered, as well as incorporating our values. So I think you'll find, hopefully, that they are broad-based questions that will address as many of the issues that we could in your registrations. And so with that, I am going to pass this on and put both Erica Smitka, who is our executive director for the New York State League, as well as Congressman Mannion out in front here. So there is, there we go. And I am going to disappear.
Great. Thank you so much, Kim. And thank you so much to all 4 of our local leagues for working so hard to pull this event together this evening. Thank you to Congressman Mannion, and thank you most of all to everyone in the audience who has joined us. As Kim said, my name is Erica Smitka. I'm the executive director of our New York State League. We are a 3-tiered organization, so we work both federally on the national level, we work on the state level on state level policy and advocacy, and then we work on the local level. We have 42 local leagues across New York State, from up to Plattsburgh to out to the very western tip of New York, all the way out to the Hamptons. We are an organization that was founded in 1919, born out of the women's suffrage movement. And as Kim said, we're nonpartisan, and we are a nonprofit. Since our founding, which was, as I said, based on fighting for the rights of women to have access to the ballot, we've continued to fight for equality and a strong democracy on all levels. We are thrilled to be joined by Congressman John Mannion this evening, representative of New York's 22nd District, a former New York State representative for the 50th District. He won his seat in Congress in 2024. Congressman, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Erica, and thank you to Kim and all of the different League of Women Voters that are out there, the different chapters who have hosted this and given me the opportunity to participate. I appreciate it. I've had the honor of participating in forums in the past and other events, and I know that I'm grateful for the organization that's out there, because we need this. And honestly, there's fewer opportunities to do this, fewer organizations that are making sure that we hold true to our values as a country. So as you said, I'm newly elected to Congress. There's a lot that goes on there, but I've got great people around me. And certainly I feel incredibly supported by the folks that I represent. We are in a very challenging time, as we all know. It's beyond challenging. It's the most challenging time of our lifetime. I go back to my my experience as a teacher and I feel I have a duty to educate people, and I'm sure we'll get to some of that education tonight. But I'm also, a native Central New Yorker. I lived my whole life in Onondaga County, and I know where people are coming from here. And we know right from wrong, and we like rules, and we like diplomacy. We like to see that people are willing to work with each other. That's been my experience. I believe I carried that out in the classroom, never knowing that I would ever run for elected office. And I stay true to myself and true to my values, and I think the values of Central New York and the Mohawk Valley. So I really appreciate everybody participating. We know that we need to be active, and I will continue to be active and look forward to the questions that we have tonight. Give me an opportunity to share what my experience has been, what I have done, what I'm going to continue to do, and how everybody can continue to be helpful in making sure that we uphold our Constitution, our values, our laws, and beyond.
Absolutely. And, just as you said, we truly are in a historic time at this very moment in our nation's history. And I know folks are excited to hear more from you. So let's dive right in. So as Kim said, all the questions this evening will be coming from our attendees who really represent a diverse group of New Yorkers across the 22nd District, but also across the full state of New York. I think the past few months have really been a whirlwind for many, as we've seen things happen on the federal level that we may not have seen in the past. So one of our first questions is around democracy and maintaining democracy. A core value of democracy is really the separation of powers, with no one branch of government having more influence or power than others. What are you doing as a member of the House of Representatives, and what are others doing to reclaim the role of Congress, really as one of three equal branches of government?
Yeah. So as you've said, this is unprecedented, and I agree with the statement before the question there. What we're seeing now is very dangerous. It's an erosion of our constitutional order. Many of us, when we were running for office, used those platforms to let everybody know how dangerous that another administration would be. And I also remind people that in 2017, during the first Trump administration, Republicans had the House and the Senate, but we didn't see what's happening here. And it really comes down to upholding our oath to protect and defend and uphold the Constitution of the United States. So the leadership in both houses of Congress right now are simply not doing that. They've willingly ceded their powers to the executive in a number of different ways. Dollars that were already appropriated from the previous Congress, hearings that need to be held if there's going to be changes to the inspector generals, and we can talk about that in the future. But this administration is governing by fear, and that is not how we conduct ourselves in this country. It's no way to lead. It's really a violation of our values, and without pushback from the Republican majority in both the Senate and the House, what we're seeing is a trampling of the Constitution. So I continue to call that out. I feel that it's my duty to inform people. I speak not just to the people that I represent. I speak to my colleagues. I speak to my colleagues that are Democrats and, of course, Republicans to remind them of the constitutional order and what our duties are as a Congress. And I tell you, a lot of folks on the other side do feel the same way that you do. They feel the same way that I do. What we need is for them to defend, for me, the House of Representatives and our roles. But I join my Democratic colleagues. We have rapid response teams. And what we've seen is, of course, a flooding of the zone of the media, a flooding of the zone of executive orders and actions that are unconstitutional. And I think we would all agree, unprecedented. So we're fighting back in the courts. I've signed on to multiple amicus briefs. We have a working group that continues to work with attorney generals, organizations like the ACLU, labor unions, to get into the courts, but the courts take time, and that's a frustration for everyone. So what we really continue to do are three things. We litigate, takes time, we're winning in the courts. We also legislate. And what people don't see, and we just saw this as the budget resolution before it came to the floor, there are multiple amendments that are submitted to this legislation by members of the Rules Committee or others committee, the Budget Committee in the past, to make reasonable changes to something like the budget resolution. And unfortunately, they are voted down by party lines. So I'm going to continue to elevate the message. This is a great opportunity tonight. I'm in the media. I go on conservative radio. I certainly have attended rallies like just this weekend, and I'm going to continue to do that to try to inform people. It's frustrating for everyone. We have too great of a country. We're the greatest democracy in the history of this world. As the president continues to test our systems and our institutions in an unprecedented way, we have to stand united and we can't be discouraged. And I say that the preservation of this democracy, it's not going to be simple. We're not going to be able to flip a switch. We're all going to have to push together. It will be like pushing a mountain. We have history on our side. We have the Constitution on our side, and we have public support on our side. And it is an unprecedented time. So it's not for the faint of heart. We need everybody to uphold the Constitution, and I'm going to continue to petition my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to do so.
Absolutely. And there's, you mentioned that there are folks who feel similarly on both sides of the aisle in terms of, some fear at watching some of the tenets of our democracy erode in some ways. What do you think? Can you talk a little bit more about why you think there's some indecision or inaction on their part? What do you feel is holding folks back from really standing up and speaking out?
Well, unfortunately, it's fear. Like I said, the first time that Trump had a trifecta with the House and the Senate, we did not see this. And it could have been that, they maybe weren't as organized or as planned. But there has to be pushback. It's our job. It's about the balance of power. So back then, it was Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell. And we just didn't let the administration violate the Constitution repeatedly. So when I talk to my colleagues, I get a series of different reactions. I think very early on, I got kind of it brushed off, or, you ran on threats to democracy. This is what the people wanted. They rejected that. Sometimes it's that pushback. Sometimes it's kind of head down or laughing it off. But I will say that there's certain events that again, like talking about defying court orders, or barely defying court orders, or making statements like we need to impeach federal judges. These are a bridge too far, not a bridge too far for them to come out and speak out. So on the side, there's a little eye rolling. There's I think they're really kind of rooting for us to keep winning in the courts and to push back. And I've said it. We're here to welcome you, and not welcome you necessarily to the party, to welcome you to the preservation of our democracy, which is necessary. We're not even talking about anymore, because it's so far down the front page, the release of January 6th rioters that interrupted the peaceful transfer of power. Does that have something to do with it? It's shocking and scary, but I do believe that that's a part of it. And what we've seen, and I ran to work with everyone, but what we've seen in the other party is an elimination of those that stood up for the rule of law, that stood up for the co-equal branches of government, stood up for what's right, honestly, and what's American. And unfortunately, there's fewer and fewer of those folks around because their party has eliminated them.
Yeah, it really is that fear, as you said. This morning you were down in DC voting against the SAVE Act, which did pass in Congress and will now make its way to the Senate. For folks who aren't aware, the SAVE Act would require proof of citizenship to register or to re-register to vote in federal elections, and it would impact millions of voters, making it much harder to vote. The League is against the SAVE Act. We know that Congressman Mannion, we know that you agree with us, but we, continue to see other threats to voting rights, and these threats are certainly underway. What's being done to help safeguard those rights?
Well, even today, there was motions made to amend that piece of legislation, which is a bad piece of legislation. And unfortunately, it's based on, shockingly, it's based on mistruths, misinformation, disinformation. We're actually making policy out of these things now. So I've run in 4 elections. I lost one. I've won three. Three of them came down to an absentee count or a hand recount. Um, I've watched democracy work and work well in the state and run by professionals. So I lost an election that was a close one, but I knew that it was done correctly. So I use my personal experiences to speak out. I have a record in the New York State Senate of making sure that voting access is there and expanded so that we make sure that there's multiple opportunities for individuals to vote. And there are protections within our system. So what was being pushed, and I listened to it on the floor today, the rhetoric that came out about people who are undocumented that are voting, which simply doesn't happen, and the high levels of voter fraud, which simply doesn't happen. Our colleagues know this. Certainly our New York delegation knows it. And I asked them to stand up. So I was proud to support the New York State version of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And I'm a co-sponsor of that legislation here. I was fortunate enough to just go to Selma, Alabama, and witness, the 60th anniversary with my colleagues of Bloody Sunday. And it's a reminder that voting access did not come easy. It was fought for over a long period of time. And just like our democracy, we continue to fight for it. So I tell my personal story and will continue to. I will reject the narrative that's out there in any public setting where I have the ability to do so. And we're going to continue to push back and vote accordingly on any legislation that is a voter suppression bill, which is exactly what this is. And anyone that reads the bill knows, and I know that the league advocated for voting no on this, that it is outrageous that we would take such a dramatic step backwards. I hope and believe that the Senate will do the right thing and reject this. It really becomes a different country than what we live in if it is passed over there. So I'm going to continue to lend my voice to the conversation and get on good legislation that protects our right to vote and expands voting access.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought up the New York John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act, which was hugely impactful, obviously, here in the state of New York, and the gutting of this law, or this similar law on the federal level in 2013 has led to the passage of over 100 pieces of legislation that are harmful voting laws or restrictive voting laws in states across the country. So glad to hear that you're also a co-sponsor on that federal piece of legislation.
Yep.
You spoke about mis and disinformation, and that's really where our next question leads us. So we're in an era where misinformation is becoming more and more normalized. We're seeing policies around healthcare, immigration, our education system are among some of the areas that have been negatively, and obviously our democracy space, some of the areas that have been negatively affected by the deliberate spreading of mistruths. Can you talk a little bit more about what you are able to do to help counteract this information that's being blatantly misrepresented? And then how is Congress holding its members and members of other branches of government accountable?
Well, we need everybody to hold misinformation speakers accountable. This didn't happen overnight. This has been happening for a long time, and long before I ran for office. What we're seeing are two things, more than two probably. But when I talk about the threats that are happening to democracy and the backstops that are being removed, I also remind people that we're in the midst of a very aggressive and multifaceted misinformation and disinformation campaign. I sat on the House floor. I listened to blatant lies coming out of the president's mouth, talking about people that were enrolled in Social Security and the numbers of them that were, over 100 years old. It is that outrageous. But what I was saying about the two things is, as we have seen a decrease in independent journalism out there, the survivors have found their supporters, their listeners, their viewers, their readers. And to survive, they have created more and more outrageous rhetoric or left things sort of open-ended so that people connect their own dots and question what's happening there. So, listen, I did do some things in the state level, which is we supported a tax credit for small independent press organizations so that they can survive and make sure that the stories are out there. The blatant lies have to be explained. At my core, I'm a teacher. So either on my social media or when I'm in interviews on television or on the radio, I feel a duty to the entire audience of NY22 to say this is a blatant lie. And I did that right after the State of the Union. That's just one small piece of that. You know, it is frustrating because people and organizations will perpetuate that lie. And I appreciate that when I post something on social media, and I don't want a toxic setting on my social media pages, but I see them as to be informative. And what I've seen over the last, 80 something days or so is that people are adding facts, details, citing sources to some of the posts that I make. And that's so important. We don't want a more divisive country, but we do need a truthful country. And the more that we have gone from, it used to be, if a politician was caught in a lie, it could be a career ender. Then it
Right.
became more commonplace. Then it got to the point where it's like, well, listen, if my guy's lying, I'm okay with the lie. And that does not lead us down a path. So there is a misinformation bubble out there that's being fed from the highest offices of our country. And we have conservative radio, we have television networks, we have members of Congress that are perpetuating these lies. And, Congress has a duty. We're a deliberative body. We can't base our actions on lies, and we can't perpetuate that. We can't mislead the American people. So, I think you can hear a little bit of frustration in my voice because I understand the danger of the lies. I wouldn't have left the classroom if I didn't see the danger in the lies. And 2016's election was really what got me to eventually run for office because I watched juniors in high school and I taught them for a generation, 16-year-olds, impressionable, maybe the first presidential election that they had ever really been engaged with. And they're watching lies and demonizing and just un-American actions. And here we are, 9 years later or so, and we're still in the throes of that. And it's much worse. So, it's leaders and it's leaders calling out their own side. Sometimes it's calling them out on the floor of the House of Representatives. Sometimes it's a social media post. Sometimes it's on TV. We have to keep doing it. And certainly the support of the people that believe the truth and know how important the truth is appreciated from them. And we got to keep doing that.
Absolutely. It's pretty scary when you're seeing things too come down, decisions that are such as the recent funding cuts to the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which helps fund some of our election security. And some of that goes to pushing back against mis and disinformation. And so when we see things like that funding be cut, it's certainly a little scary, but we also talk about combating mis and disinformation in a similar way that you have, that it really is a whole of society approach, and we need to see everyone pushing back against what are blatant lies that we're seeing on the national stage. So thank you for that. Our next question is a little bit more broad. Can you talk more about your vision and your goal for working with other members of Congress? What steps have you taken to achieve those outcomes? And how is the New York State congressional delegation working together to advocate for residents of our state?
So I represented down the middle district, and I know the people here, what our values are, what our priorities are. And I have watched over the course of time that the majority of our elected officials, whether they're local in Albany or in Washington, work together and understand they must represent everyone. I was disabilities chair in the New York State Senate, so almost all of my legislation that I advanced through that committee had Republican and Democratic co-sponsors and would be passed unanimously often. I carry that same attitude even in these highly polarized times in DC.
Mm.
I feel I have a duty to call out the truth, to push back against violations of the Constitution, and I'm doing that. But at the same time, I have to conduct business, not business as normal, but I have to conduct business in representing the people that I represent and truly representing them. And they do want me to be bipartisan. So I've co-sponsored 49 bills with my colleagues. They're on both sides of the aisle, most recently working with the New York State delegation, including Republican members. It's Republican legislation to make government reviews, more efficient, if I can use that word, because we know that there's challenges when it comes to permitting. I was a biology teacher. We have made great changes in protecting our environment over time. I have concerns about this administration, but if we're going to be competitive, not just here locally, but as a country, we have overregulated to a degree. So, my goal is to be on bipartisan caucuses, and I am, share my goals and visions. It gives me an opportunity to talk about the priorities for Central New York and the Mohawk Valley and the priorities for this country and what's right. So that is the same. I am still here. I said when I was elected, I'm here to work with the president. But if this administration is going to violate federal law, break the Constitution, demonize people, threaten to violate court orders or violate court orders, then I've got a job to do there. And I can do both. I have to do both, So we want to make sure that Central New York and the Mohawk Valley get their fair share, that I'm advancing their priorities. What does that mean? It means making sure we have great schools, making sure that we maintain our freedoms, boosting our economic opportunities, lowering costs, making sure our communities are safe, all of those things together. And those issues are generally bipartisan issues. So in these unprecedented times, we have to do both. But when it comes to standing up for the Constitution and the rule of law, I'll unapologetically be very loud, very energized, and honestly reach out to anyone who will be supportive. And we do have the public support. I think people feel they have the public support. When I go speak somewhere, I say there are probably people who voted for Donald Trump here, but they're here. They're here. Whenever people get to that moment where it is a bridge too far, then we need to all stand together, remember that we're all Americans, and protect our democracy, and push back when necessary and call it out when necessary.
Absolutely. I think I'm sure I'd imagine it can kind of feel like screaming into the void sometimes. But so it's nice to hear directly from you that folks feel that the public is behind our representatives when they're working to enforce and defend our democracy.
And we can't be discouraged. We can't. It's easy to be discouraged. I talk to people, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I talk to people every day that's like, I have to regulate for my own wellness. I can give myself a half hour on my phone. I can give myself a half hour of the news, but I can't do any more. Stay informed and keep pushing. If there are people who are trying to push us towards an oligarchy or an autocracy, they're hoping people become discouraged and fearful. And we have too great of a country. We can't have that. So don't get discouraged. I won't be.
Absolutely. Those little steps really, make an impact. Earlier you mentioned briefly, you mentioned Social Security. So our next question is really around that. We're seeing the administration work to do some things to dismantle Social Security from within, as they've done in other federal departments. What's being done to protect Social Security and maintain reliable access to those who depend on it?
Right. Listen, Social Security is something that we've paid into. It is the protection for when people reach their older years. It is a program that works. And what we've seen from this administration is a clear action, which is to demonize it, call it names like a Ponzi scheme and a scam, and say untruthful things about it, and then excise it, cut it from within, and then potentially privatize it. There's legislation out there already. I'm a co-sponsor of it. Multiple pieces of legislation how to make sure that Social Security lasts long into the future. As many people probably know, there is a cap at the top when someone reaches a certain income level. So we all pay about 6.2% up to about $175,000. And then that cap hits. And if there's someone who earns more, their percentage that they're paying in goes way down because they stop paying. We've got to change that. That's one thing that we can do to change it. But they're going to continue, those that are trying to privatize it or kill it are going to keep sending a message, that it's not working, it's unsustainable. It's not. I just sat with members of like basically a Social Security caucus. We met with former Social Security Administrator Martin O'Malley, and he talked about how this is a successful program. It is sustainable. We have to be committed to it. We can't privatize it. What we've seen, I'm not trying to scare people, we have almost the lowest ever, but 50-year lows in the workforce. And what we've seen since the Trump administration took over is the largest decline in employees in the history of Social Security, like the sharpest decline. So the stories are already out there, and the changes are already happening. If they're trying to make Social Security fail by gutting the department, that's absolutely unacceptable. Again, it's against the will of the people. So we do have legislation against it. We have litigation as far as the firing of some of these Social Security Administration employees. And I hate to, scare people on this because the loss of Social Security really scares people, but they have changed their websites and some of the statements on there that are like, if you're having trouble with this, here's what you can do. Requiring people who live in rural areas or are older, they might have mobility issues, they may have a disability, to require them to come in person is just unacceptable. And this is already happening. So on Tuesday, nationwide, it is the Defend Social Security Day. I will be participating in it. I will be in the media talking about it, and I'll be trying to continue to tell the truth around it and how important it is. We absolutely have to preserve it. People are being told lies about it, and we need to get those individuals back and employed. Martin O'Malley said that the people who are still there are there because they believe in being dedicated to the cause of supporting some of our most vulnerable in this country. Musk and Doge are attempting to dismantle it. The people don't want it. You know, I don't I know that from a legislative and litigation standpoint, we're going to continue to do everything we can. And then with the expectation that we will be back in office, it's going to be a challenge to rebuild it, but we must rebuild it and continue the fight for Social Security. It is our safety net that has served us well and is necessary. So the fact that people are on the phone for 8 hours and can't get a representative, the fact that they have to go in person is absolutely unacceptable. And again, the flooding the zone tactic has made it challenging to get this information out there. I watch the news when I can, and I believe that every story that's out there, and I've said it in the media, should be about these actions of the administration to centralize powers and destroy key, social programs like Social Security. So we're keep fighting. It's a three-pronged attack. It's litigation, legislation, and elevating the message to make sure that everybody knows that it works and should be supported, and push back against the blatant lies that exist about it.
Certainly, yeah, it's good to hear there's a measured approach and plan to defend one of our, the basic programmatic institutions of our country. So that's great. We're going to shift gears, a little bit and talk a bit about trade. So the League supports a U.S. trade policy that's aimed at reducing trade barriers and expanding international trade for a number of reasons. And obviously tariffs have been a very hot topic, especially within the past day or so. What's your position on the recent tariff policy of the administration, specifically as it impacts New York State? And how do you see yourself advocating for international cooperation and democratic values to promote economic prosperity at home and abroad? It's a big question.
Well, listen, there's a lot to say here. Tariffs have always been a part of our policy, but they have been negotiated. They have been, studied and basically determined where we are going to apply tariffs and what makes sense. And it's not a perfect science, but I will say I wasn't an economist. I was a biology teacher. Organisms like stability. And what we're seeing here is a lack of stability that is having a real impact on individuals. I've spoken with probably 10 small, medium, and large businesses in the area, and they're already being impacted just by the threat of tariffs. They've lost contracts, costs have gone up, difficult decisions have had to have been made, and some people have been, let go. The president also is using emergency powers right now and saying that he has the authority to do so. This is where certainly our side of the aisle is calling that out and filing legislation and writing letters. To I just wrote a letter to the White House, to the Speaker of the House, saying this is our authority. Uh, we can do this in a smart way with congressional approval. There's legislation out there to put a pause on any tariff that must be vetted by Congress. And some people think Congress moves slowly, but deliberate actions are important, especially when we're talking about our allies, our friends, our neighbors, our business partners, where we have a shared interest in getting this right. It's having a real impact. So, there is a room for tariffs. This is absolutely not the way to do it. It's putting American businesses and businesses around the world in a position where they can't operate effectively or efficiently, and it's going to have a tremendous cascading effect on our economy that is not good. So, um, uh, this is a bad action. It doesn't mean that there's not room for tariffs, but I will say this: trade wars are usually not good for anybody, and trade wars can lead to much larger conflicts. So these need to be thought out well, and I think there's great consensus that these were not thought out. This was done with a sledgehammer and not a scalpel, and it's unacceptable to me. Certainly, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle colleagues on the others, but unfortunately, they're not speaking up in the manner that I think that they should.
Certainly. Do you think that, given the president's recent announcement that he's going to put a pause on tariffs, on some tariffs and some of those policies, has that changed the way in which you and your colleagues are approaching this issue?
Well, listen, the pause is again unpredictable. Damage has already been done because of the threats and in some cases, the implementation of these tariffs. If you look at what happened around yesterday, a couple very big things. Why did the pause come on the tariffs? If you look at what was happening to the Treasury bonds and the sell-off that was happening, somebody got to the president and said, "This is not sound policy, and we're really heading towards." An awful position. The chances of a recession have gone up as a result, part of the economic policies here, including the tariffs. And then also, from an ethics standpoint, what we saw was a big jump in the market yesterday after the pause. Prior to the pause, the president put out there on social media that it was a good day to buy. This is a clear violation of ethics. I'm on a letter calling that out. I'm using setting like this to call it out. It's completely inappropriate. It's unprecedented. No one would ever imagine that previous presidents, Republican or Democrat, would ever do anything like this to, what he's being accused of is enrich his friends, people that are in the know. We have clear ethics laws around this. It should never happen. There should be a hearing immediately, just like with the events of, what happened on Signal with our national defense. There should be a hearing. We continue to call for hearings, force people to sit, put their hand on the Bible, swear to tell the truth, and be questioned appropriately. That's what should be happening when it comes to actions like this. So, again, I'm not an economist, but I do know that when it comes to tariffs, Congress should be playing a role, and these should be very well calculated actions that are thought out, negotiated. And what we're doing is we're getting into a different kind of war. We're getting into a trade war, but that's going to create certainly conflict with our typical business partners, conflict with those that may be considered our adversaries as well. I'm very concerned about it. And again, we're the United States of America. We're supposed to be a global leader. Uh, I can talk more about this, but we set the tone and tenor for the world, and really have been not just a leader of the free world, but a leader of the world for a long time, since World War II. We we don't conduct business this way. It's destabilizing the entire world's economy. Not good for anyone, and the impact is going to come, I'm afraid. But it's already hitting families. They're already having to make hard decisions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. We've got time for just one or two more questions here. And one of our last questions gets back to your roots, back to your roots as a biologist. The League has spent decades advocating for responsible management of our natural resources, to ensure future availability, and also obviously to protect our environment. Unfortunately, we've seen progress in this area reversed with some recent executive orders. Can you talk more about what your values are in this area, and what's your approach to putting those values into action?
Yes, I was fortunate enough to be on the Environmental Conservation Committee in the New York State Senate and the Energy Committee. So, we have been a leader in New York State. Also, the history of where I live, Onondaga Lake being a pollutant, the most polluted lake in the country at one point. So we have to be good stewards of the earth. And this country has come a long way with really groundbreaking legislation federally and in the state with the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, and others. So I was a biology teacher. I taught about climate change and harmful algal blooms and carbon sequestering, so I believe very deeply that the negative impacts of climate change are already harming ecosystems, our environment, and the most recent executive orders from the administration that roll back regulations on things like the coal industry, repealing clean energy initiatives, blocking state policies that are trying to combat climate change are absolutely unacceptable. And again, the actions are occurring in the courts with our partners. We're trying to inform people of how dangerous this is. And we're also, trying to amend and protect legislation, including appropriated dollars toward green energy projects. I was just at an energy symposium at the College of Environmental Science and Forestry it was almost a week ago. And, carbon-free energy, geothermal, hydro, hydrogen, this is where we are going. These things are new and exciting. And if we're going to achieve energy independence, we need all of it. And what's amazing to me is in our efforts in the state to go through this energy transition, we lost a potential plant that was going to move in Messina, a hydrogen generating plant that's gone. Now, this should not be controversial. This is not a Democratic or a Republican issue. This is meeting our energy needs as a country, which are only going to go up. So as the fossil fuel markets, just the markets, forget the environment. The environment is what we have to do to protect this planet for future generations. But just the market itself, fossil fuels aren't going to be there forever, or they're not going to be affordable. So we have to make this transition. Let's do it. It's outrageous that these changes are occurring. And I know that myself, other leaders members of the Senate, members of the state legislature, other partners with environmental groups are saying we can't reverse these things for the good of the earth and also our energy needs. In New York State, we have a project happening right now where with Hydro-Quebec to run hydro energy under Lake Champlain down to New York City, upwards of 20% of the energy that's going to supply New York City, clean energy, is with Hydro-Quebec. And I hate to say it, but we joked in the state legislature, what would ever happen if something happened to our relationship with Canada? So the regulation changes are bad, the relationship changes are bad. And this is not the will of the people. They're not asking for this. They want a clean environment. They want our leaders to be responsible. And those regulations are in place to protect us from some of the things that really were sins of the past. So again, we keep legislating, we keep working with our partners to litigate, and we have to inform people of how dangerous this is. And, I know my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, many of them feel the same way. They certainly, at a minimum, feel the same way about our energy independence and that we can't take especially clean energy sources offline at this time.
Certainly. Yeah, the league absolutely agrees. I think one of the biggest things that we've seen over the past few months has been the attempt and the action to make drastic cuts to budgets and federal spending. As an organization, we certainly believe that the federal deficit should be reduced, but we oppose across the board budget cuts, spending cuts. What's your position on how to achieve fiscal responsibility while still ensuring that the government has the resources it needs to keep its commitments and to support citizens?
We do have federal legislation like the reconciliation process and to make sure that we should not be adding to the debt, yet we still continue to do so. So what we just saw with the passing of this budget resolution is really incredibly irresponsible, because what we're doing, and I voted against it, of course, but what's happening in this legislation is that we are cutting necessary support programs for those that need it. The other side will say it's not explicitly lined out in the bill, but the committees that are going to be charged with making these cuts, the amount of money in those committees, like the $880 billion that needs to be cut from energy and commerce, you can't find $880 billion without touching Medicaid. So to do those things and then increase, we're going to have to increase our debt to be able to provide tax breaks for the ultra wealthy in this country. We've got to, do we have to, bite the bullet and do things like some of our laws say, which is to make sure that we're fiscally responsible? We absolutely have to do it. There's great consensus. What happened today does not do that at all. So, it's very concerning. We cannot continue to increase the debt. We did go through a pandemic. We are trying to invest in our infrastructure. But for me, we may need to make sure that corporations and the wealthiest pay their fair share. And yes, we need to be fiscally responsible. The government accountability office every year comes out with recommendations to find where there's waste, to find where there's duplication of services. And we don't follow that plan that a government agency actually comes out and does. And should we look at everything and carefully try to reduce our costs and get rid of the waste that exists there? We absolutely should. We should not do it on the backs of those that need things the most. We should be thoughtful. And should we move towards balancing the budget? We have to. We've got to do that. What's shocking to me is we have people that are preaching fiscal responsibility, and they just voted in the opposite way. And not just in the opposite way, but to take from those that need it and give to those that don't. It's unbelievable to me. I can't believe what I heard today on the floor and the hypocrisy that exists.
Congressman, one of our final questions for you is, you're obviously here as a representative of the 22nd District. How do you ensure that you're representing what your constituents want? How do you approach getting feedback from your constituents?
Sure. Well, listen, I have a great team, and of course, especially during this very chaotic time, we get lots of emails, we get lots of calls, and it really means a lot when I have somebody catch me on the street and say, your team has done a great job. They got back to me. It is really a challenge because the number of calls and emails have gone up. But I ask people to do a few things which will help our offices keep people informed. And one of those is to go to our website, which is mannion.house.gov. And if they go in there, they can sign up, like signing up for our newsletter gets us into the system. It's a lot to start a freshman office, even if you're a former legislator, but we are up and running. I got a great team that's hitting the ground running right off the bat. And I get briefed on what the incoming is. And it is thousands of emails and calls and the responses that we give. You know, so when you contact my staff with concerns or vote recommendations or comments, or all of that is always written down. We keep it all documented. It is shared with me. And, you know, when I can, I really love having those one-to-one conversations with individuals. There's 777,000 people in the district. It makes it a challenge. But particularly if you need a constituent issue addressed, my team is there to help. And please contact our office in doing so. We have mobile office hours that are out there around the various communities. We have an office in Syracuse. Actually, had an office ready to go in Utica on our timeline that we wanted. Unfortunately, when you heard stories about GSA, the government agency that controls, office buildings and leases, that did upend right at that time with the shuttering of some other offices, the ability to secure leases. We're back on track. We'll have that going. I have constituent coffees. I had one just yesterday in DC. It gives me the opportunity to talk to people, and I thank everyone for engaging my office and honestly being so kind and so supportive when they're addressing my office, because people are frustrated. But I got a great team. I say this, you can be mad at me, you can be upset with me. These folks here could be doing a lot of different things, but they've made a decision to work to serve the people of the 22nd. So your kindness and understanding is appreciated, but we strive to be as responsive as possible and certainly deliver for the people that need help.
Absolutely. And is that the best way for folks to take action right now? What would you recommend someone do who's frustrated with what they're seeing on the federal level?
Well, see, listen, I just saw someone go, thank John Mannion for his vote on the SAVE Act. I appreciate that. Thank you. But like you just heard, my team is really working hard to help people who have lost their job, not-for-profits organizations that have lost their funding, a whole series of individuals that can't get a hold of the Veterans Administration, or have can't get an answer because their appointment was canceled at the VA. So listen, we want to hear from you. We appreciate the support. Know that I'm informed and engaged. And yes, people should engage with their elected official. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't do that, but my folks are working hard to get things done. I encourage people to, yes, talk to their elected officials in whatever manner they can. It's not so easy to access those elected officials. We are in DC multiple days a week, 3 out of 4 weeks a month, usually. But my staff is there to listen. And like I said, everything is recorded. I also have encouraged people to take a more active role in organizations, and I've cited them multiple times, like the League of Women Voters, or whatever you are closely connected to, be it a political organization, be it a bipartisan organization. Take a more active role. Have those difficult conversations about how important our democracy is. That could be fraternities or sororities. It could be the NAACP or La Liga or the League of Conservation Voters or veterans organizations. So, it's time for some tough conversations. And I've had those conversations. I think we've all had them about how this country has to move forward in a positive way. The rule of law must stand. Go find those organizations out there. Yes, talk to your elected officials. Talk to local officials as well, both Democrat and Republican. Talk to everyone. And I'm inspired by the power of the people and the voice of the people that's out there. And I thank everyone for their support. I certainly got into this to work with everyone, but I have a duty. I'm going to continue to work with everyone, but I have a duty to tell the truth. I have a duty to stand up, and I feel the support of so many in doing that. In this area of the country, we know right from wrong. And, violating the Constitution is wrong. Demonizing people is wrong. Slandering people is just not right. And then some of these actions have been inhumane and un-American. And we've seen what happened in Sackett's Harbor. This is why there must be due process. This is why we must follow the rule of law. And if we're going to be true to our values as Americans, we have to hold those folks accountable. It's more challenging right now because we're not seeing the other side of the aisle hold their own side accountable. They do sporadically. They do sometimes. I give credit where credit is due. But we need to know that they're supported as well. It's the will of the people to make sure that we uphold the Constitution, that we stand together, that we support each other. I frequently say when I talk, stand together because you are in the majority. People have, I think, some reawakened to how much they love their democracy and how much they appreciate their democracy. And some have always known it. But we're going to be on the right side of this. Join your local organization, support those organizations that are standing up for democracy, and support those individuals that are as well, that are in positions of power where they can push, positive change.
Certainly. We like to say democracy is built from the ground up, and it absolutely is. For folks on the call who might not be a part of an organization, we would encourage you to join the league. You can go to lwv.org/join. But thank you so much, Congressman Mannion, for taking the time to be here with us this evening. Thank you so much to the local leagues who pulled this together, and thank you to our audience for joining us here. I think we've all learned a lot and taken a lot from this conversation, and we appreciate it. I'll
Yes.
pass it to you for the last words. Yeah.
Thank you, Erica. I want to thank you so much for your help. I want to thank Kim Cameron, for the organization that happened here and the opportunity to do this. I want to thank my team also, who did a great job. And I want to leave you with the words of President Obama that I saw at Hamilton College, who said, "No one's coming to save us." To your point, democracy is from the ground up. No one is coming to save us. But I have faith in the citizens of this country, and I have faith in the leaders of this country, the history of this country that has served us well, and it's organizations like the League of Women Voters that make sure that we uphold our democracy, uphold our Constitution, support each other, and give all folks an avenue to be able to have their voice heard. And I thank you for having me here tonight.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night, all.
Thank you.